Hello, I'm Canon. Welcome to my YouTube channel to a set of videos regarding adapting full-frame 35mm lenses to the Fuji GFX. And here's one easy recommendation. This is the Canon 135mm or 135 f2.0, an excellent portrait lens. A bit extreme regarding the portrait range, but on the Fuji it will act more of a 100mm f1.4, 1.6. And it gives amazing results. With the faceted aperture, the lens covers the entire frame at every focal distance. If we'll close the aperture at around 8 or 11, we'll have some hard-edged black corners. But to its intended purpose, I think this lens is excellent. It's an easy recommendation. Let's move to the Repro Stand and see what this lens can do. Now we have the focus at infinity and f2.0, and we'll see that there's almost no vignette, and what there is fully correctable in Lightroom at f2.8 at every focus distance. Now we're moving towards the minimum focus distance of 95 centimeters, and you see nothing happens, almost no vignette whatsoever, and the vignette that is apparent is correctable. Okay, back from the Repro Stand. Let's check out some sample images. Okay, so here's a small collection of images from the EF135. I think none of them is cropped, and there's also a panorama that we'll check out later on. Let's take a look. So here you can see what the lens can do. Let's see, no crop at all at medium range, 135 at f2.0, and in this wide aperture there's no vignette to speak of. Let's see the details. So we can see that I missed focus a bit, but wherever things are in focus, the details are incredible. Let's take a look at another image, and here we can see one of the main characteristics of this lens on the bigger sensor, and that's the cat's eye bokeh. We can see that when we go to the corners, the bokeh becomes really football shape or cat's eye shaped. It happens on the 35mm full frame as well, but it's much more pronounced on the medium format sensor. We can see what looks as a vignette, but I'm quite convinced that this is mostly just shading in the image itself. Let's take a look at the lens correction. We'll take the Canon, and it goes to the RF f1.8, but let's move it to the 135. Okay, so we can see it's not vignette, it's just the subject matter of the frame, and almost no correction is needed in this lens, at least in my opinion. Let's take a look at the details in the middle. We can see great resolution, great details. Every hair is in place. There are some aberrations of sort, but it is f2 on a relatively old lens design. All in all, looks good. No onion rings on the bokeh. Renders quite nicely. The rendering itself is extremely smooth and pleasant in all those bokeh balls or whatever. And all in all, very nice portrait lens. This image was shot directly into the sun with the lens hood on, but it shows the flare resistance of the lens. Let's take a look at autofocus performance in such extreme conditions. We can see the focus is relatively accurate onto the edges of the coat, and relatively sharp, at least in the middle of the frame, at f2.0 into direct sunlight when the sun is in the frame. I think this is quite impressive, especially for a lens that is relatively old. Here's another image. Let's take a look at the details. We can see very decent sharpness and excellent amount of details in the sharp areas of the focus, and nice rendering of the out of focus items. Let's take the dehaze slider a bit up. The dehaze is quite aggressive, but it does something pretty unique to the image. We can also work with the contrast and maybe take the exposure down just a bit. And now we can see some swirliness in the out of focus areas. This happens in many full-frame lenses when adapted to the bigger GFX sensor. In this image we can finally see some flare out of that lens with the sun smack in the middle of the frame, and we can also see some vignetting. Let's put on some lens correction and see what it does. Here we can see the correction works in a way, but still some vignette in this extreme condition. Let's take the exposure down just to see how the sun looks. Here we can see the sun. Such an amazing dynamic range on that sensor. Now the only point where we can see hard-edged corners with the 135 f2.0 is if we'll close the aperture to around f11, f8 and sometimes even f5.6 and shoot with focus set to around infinity or some long distance. And there we have some pitch black corners that can't be recovered in any means. Let's check the lens corrections. Those are already corrected and with no profile enabled. They're just a bit harsher, but if you want to use this lens for landscape or anything like that, you're probably gonna have to crop the image a bit. But a nice thing that we've seen here, this is a panorama of 3 images. We do have some pitch black corners, but as a panorama, we see that Adobe Lightroom managed to cope with the darker corners, and with just the slightest of crops, we'll be able to eliminate all dark corners. Excellent technical quality, and lets us widen the field of view of this telelens for some interest landscape and even portraiture. So all in all, I think the 135 f2.0 is an excellent portrait lens to the GF system. It might not be as good as Fuji's own 110 f2 or the 80 f1.7, which kind of covers a different scope, but it's just a fraction of the price, extremely well built and easy to find in a sense. So it sits atop my list of highly recommended adapted lenses to the GF system.